Welcome to the PT Marketing Power Hour, highlighting successful marketing strategies from North America's fastest growing clinics so you can learn from their wins and power your practice growth. We have another great episode today, so don't forget to hit subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, here's your host, physical therapist, marketing expert, and CEO of Practice Promotions, Neil Trickett.
Hello, and welcome to the PT Marketing Power Hour, highlighting successful strategies from North America's fastest growing clinics so you can learn from their wins and power your practice growth. Hi, I'm your host, Neil Trickett, CEO of Practice Promotions, and today's focus is about maximizing your practice profit. And we have our financial guru here, Eric Miller from Econologics Financial Advisors. Welcome, Eric. Great to have you on the call.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Neil. Yes. Keep it coming.
I love it. Yeah, Eric is a whiz here when it comes to financial advice. He does specialize in healthcare practice owners and lots of different industries, rehab, PT, veterinary, all kinds of different healthcare practices. And he's given us a lot of great advice in our audience, a lot of great advice over the years here. He does help, practice owners create profitable businesses, help them pay off bad debts, save for retirement, protect the assets of the business, save on taxes, which we all like to do,
yes,
and leave a legacy behind when you are selling your business. So he does all of those kind of things. So Eric, let's jump into it here, man. You're working with a lot of practice owners across the U.S.
Yep.
What are some of the biggest challenges that you're seeing from these practice owners, what they're facing today?
I think I'll just say the biggest challenge, and we'll go with physical therapy owners. Does it matter? Most just practice owners or
practice owners is fine.
I mean, look, I'm a bit of an outsider, I guess, because I'm not a physical therapist. I'm not, I'm a financial advisor. So I kind of take it from that angle. And I see that the biggest challenge of most owners right now is the willingness to adjust from fixed ideas they have about how their business should be run and managed, and they're not willing to change what needs to change in order to make sure their business is profitable and sustainable. And that seems to be the biggest challenge that they face. And so it's just one of those things where if you can't wear the hat of an investor or an owner, and take your practitioner hat off and really understand the financial aspect of running a business, then you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And I think that's the biggest challenge that they're faced with right now.
Yeah. So you see practice owners that come to you and they're kind of stuck in their business, right? They're just running what they know well, but they haven't really maybe train themselves well on the financial and the business aspect of it?
No, they mostly don't know how to manage the finances very well. They're not willing to make adjustments based upon the environment that we're in right now.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're in an environment where reimbursements are continuing to go lower, where it's, there's more demand for physical therapists and providers, and wages are going up. And, that means that you got to be forced to have to make kind of tough decisions. The decisions on how you manage your staff, decisions on how you manage your patients,
mm-hmm.
and the ones that are, able to say, okay, I'm going to have to adjust somehow to this so that we can still maintain profitability, then those guys are going to win in the end. And the ones that don't are they're slowly just going to watch their profit margins go to 1 or 2% over
mm-hmm.
time,
So as you're dealing with those folks and you're talking to them, what's some of the biggest mistakes that you see practice owners are making when they're trying to deal with that challenge of they just don't really know, or maybe they're not confronting the hard business financial decisions?
That's the first one right there. Just knowing their numbers. What are your numbers? What should I be getting from a provider, for me to maintain profitability? And why am I hanging on to some of these contracts that I know aren't good and they're not allowing us to grow, but I'm doing it just because I always have.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, those are really I think the primary difficulties, because look, I know most of the physical therapists, you didn't go to school to become a financial beast, right? You went to school to learn how to be a practitioner, to help people. And, of course they didn't teach you those skills of managing finances and business acumen and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And that is where, you really have to kind of reach out to people like me or you or other or people that have done it well,
Mhm.
and finding out how are these people, because we're all swimming in the same sandbox, so to
Mhm.
speak. How can some of these practices be profitable, able to expand and still keep a high quality of patient care?
Yeah.
You can do it all,
You can, yeah.
you know?
We see that. We have clients that are, doing, yeah, it's a challenging environment, but they're doing good, right? They're actually growing 20% year over year, and they're doing good with their profit margins.
Yep.
It takes some work, right? And it takes some know-how. Um, that was a great point that you made about knowing your worth, right? Especially when it comes to what insurances you want to take,
Hmm.
because I've been in that world as a practice owner, and it can be so easy to say, I need the new patients in the door here, so I'm going to take, this lousy insurance over here so that Dr. X is going to send me more of the good patients, right? The ones with the better insurance. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of the mindset. And it often comes from what I see, that willingness to take lousy insurance rates comes from the fact that there's lack of confidence in being able to make the business go right without the need to have volume in the door, right? And there's
Yes.
often that lack of confidence from the marketing side of it. So if you were really confident that you could produce or drive in new patients, and you could advertise and cherry pick in patients that had better insurance because you weren't willing to take these lousy insurances, you would be in a much better situation. But often it stems from what I see is that fear of not being able to get new patients in enough with those good insurances, so they take the lousy ones.
Yeah, I think any business decisions that are made in kind of a scarcity or fear perspective are generally not going to be good
Mhm.
decisions. They're not going to be long term. They're not going to actually, be productive for the practice. So
So as
if
you advise people, you get them to look at like know your worth, like know what um, you should be making, right?
yeah,
And then look at your cost per visit or cost per hour, and then what you should be making on top of that. That's how you kind of work backwards from
I
that.
look, I mean, every physical therapy practice that I know has a facility, right, where you operate
Mhm.
from. It has so many square footage. It's, it's so big, and there's so many patients that you can see, uh, in that particular space. And I think the first thing that you'd want to do is again, like looking at it from an investment standpoint, not just a job, but looking at it as an investment, is like, what could this thing produce if it were running at full capacity? Like that's the first thing that I would look at, right?
Mhm.
And then break it down, obviously, because you're going to have to know, the demographics and the other parts of the area and the cost of the staff and all of those things. But if I got a 3,000 square foot facility right here, then I should be able to see 300 to 350 patient visits a week, right?
Mhm.
And that's the game, right? So now I know what that would look like, and I can break that down to how many providers I'm going to need to be able to do that are operating at a relative capacity. And just again, just kind of breaking it down from just like you said, from the top down. But you're looking at it from an investment standpoint, because if you're going to pour money, because it does cost money to start
Mhm.
a practice, then I do want to know what this thing could do if it were when it's operating at maximum capacity. So I think that's always the first thing that I have people try to direct their attention to.
That's a great thing you just said. It reminded me of that. We work with a lot of clinics that have multiple locations, right?
Hmm.
So it might be someone's just starting out with a second location, or they might be adding their 10th location. But um, it's almost like starting a new business in a way, right? When you get that new
Mhm.
location, because you got to, just like you were saying, like you got to work backwards from like, okay, I've got this new facility. I got to put money into it, get it up off the ground. What does this thing need to produce for me, right? That it should be producing at its maximum. And it kind of gives you that benchmark, right? Of
Yeah.
where it should be.
And I think a lot of people unfortunately start trying to like expand or get into other locations before their current locations are
Mhm.
at or near capacity. And that's a bad way to solve a cash flow problem, because you're just going to spill all the problems that you have in your current facility of why you're not at capacity to the other ones.
Yeah. Have you
So,
seen that before? Like I've
oh,
seen that before, but have you seen it
yes.
before where it's like a status thing, right? Like if I have more than one location, I'm good in my business, right? But
Dude,
like you
I've seen
said,
guys,
then can
yeah,
barely operate the first location,
they
right?
got like, seen guys that have like 20 clinics. I got 20 clinics. What's your profit margin? 2%. Like, all right.
Wow.
eh, It's fine. I mean, you can have 20 clinics for the sake of saying that you have 20 clinics, and maybe someone would look at that and say, wow, this guy has 20 clinics. And but the value of the business overall is not going to be high,
Mhm.
because there's just no positive cash flow there. So, I'd rather have one clinic that was, seeing at capacity than having multiple clinics that were, at 20% capacity. I mean, all the
Yeah.
headaches, all the staff, all of that, like,
Mhm.
no.
I would say that's the number one thing when I talk to multiple location practice owners is that there's always a few underperforming clinics, right?
Yes.
And that's the one that gets all their attention, right? So,
And how
um,
fast do they make a change on that? And that's again, what we were talking about, like, say what you will about the corporates, they don't hesitate to make fast decisions on things like that when they see that. If something's bleeding, it's cut, it's out.
yeah,
Let's get, and I think a lot of owners that don't have thousands and thousands of clinics are like, well, that's it's my baby, or it's like there's like an emotional attachment to, and I totally get that.
yeah,
But you do have to make sure that you're making a decision for the greatest good for all the practices, not
mhm,
just one of them.
yeah. And the thing that I've seen time and time again is that, you know, and again, this comes back to the emotion of it, right? It's hard to do, but um, they can be overstaffed sometimes, right, for what they're actually, producing. And your biggest expense is payroll for most clinics, right?
It is 100%. I'll say that it's tied with lost income, but
Mhm.
staff is definitely, you know, the biggest expense that I've seen most amongst all the different types of practitioners that we deal with. The cost of PT wages and just staff overall is, I mean, I've seen it as high as like 70 to 75% in some clinics,
No.
which is just not sustainable. You
Mhm.
can't, that's just way too high.
Yeah.
I guess you can keep it under like 50, 55.
Mhm.
That would be, workable.
Right. Yeah. So there's different financial levers that you can pull on for that, right? So one is getting enough business in the door. That's new patients,
Yep.
and that's where your marketing comes into place. That's what we do at Practice Promotions. We help get those new patients in so that you can actually keep everybody's schedule full and productive and producing revenue. And then you've got obviously the type of insurances that you're taking, right? So
Hmm.
knowing what you should be making per visit, right, is important
Yeah.
from there. And then obviously on the back end, making sure that your other expenses are low, right? So that you can keep watching that profit margin.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think all those things are spot on in terms of how you're looking at your numbers,
Mhm.
and it's a game. It really is a game, isn't it? I mean, it's
It
like
is.
it can change from month to month and week to week, but this is why you have to pay attention to your numbers and just be willing to do that. And I think if you're willing to do that, then you'll put your attention on it and you'll fix it and you'll see it because it'll be right in front of you. Like,
Mhm.
okay, I have to fix this.
Yeah. The thing that I've seen too, it depends on the size of your clinic. So if you're very, solopreneur, kind of clinic, you can make decisions very quickly, right? And make a very fast impact, very, quick change. The bigger that you get, the slower the ship turns, right? So you have to be looking ahead even further, like even closer at those numbers. And what are those numbers going to be, a week from now, a month from now, 3 months from now, and having to make those decisions out a bit further. Again, that where you probably see owners get into trouble is they become more reactive to things than looking ahead at their finances.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's when you're on the defensive, that's no good. You obviously want to be on the attack at least 51% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that you're on the attack.
And so for you, as you're, coaching and working with practice owners there, we've talked about this, definitely more of a struggle today, right, than ever before. But we do see those top performers, right, and they're doing good through this tough time.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see that they're doing? What's some of your top clients doing best?
I think the top clients that we have, and I'm sure we share some of them too. Number one, they know their roles really, really well in the business. Like, what is it that they do well in the business? Right? Are they, they're good owners. They understand the compliance aspect of physical therapy very well, right? They're ethical, they're moral. That's obviously a premium, to know that. And when it comes to like the profitability of the business, they don't put that on the back end. They put that on the front, right? I mean, they make sure that as they're calculating what this business needs to bring in to function, they include their profits, which includes taxes and your reserves and, other things that, for the business to be able to expand and their household to expand as well. So it's not like, hey, here's my household, here's my business. And as my business gets bigger and bigger and bigger, my household just kind of stays stagnant here a little bit, right? No. The top ones are like, no, I want to see my household at the same time be able to reap the benefits of the success of the practice as well.
Yeah, so you had a great point there. And I'd love for you to tell our audience what you taught me a long time ago, which is about the parent company. What's the parent company, right?
So look, I mean, I think people are used to right now that big corporations are invading physical therapy, right? And they're buying up smaller practices and such. And you'll see a theme that there is a parent company. These corporations have a parent company that will then buy a lot of subsidiary companies, right? And then once you sell to one of those groups, the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to have like a management fee that comes from that clinic or clinics that's going to get paid directly to the parent company. All right. And it's usually around 10% of the revenue right off the top. Why? Because these corporations are funded by investors, right? And investors want to get their money paid back to them pretty quickly. The only reason I say that is because I want owners to have that same viewpoint when it comes to their household. When you first started your practice, right? I don't know how much, I can't remember exactly how much you invested. When you started practice promotions, though, you had to put a pretty sizable investment into practice promotions, right?
Yeah. There you go.
And anyone that starts a practice has to put some kind of an investment. Either you got to borrow, or you got to buy a facility, or you have to put money in. Okay. You're an investor. So, and it's a risky business because there's 1,001 things that can go wrong that can cause a PT practice to not be profitable. Right. So you have to make sure that the household functions as the parent company. Okay. And the business is there obviously to serve the financial needs of the household. And that's the concept that we try to get across to people. And they're like, I don't understand how that works. And it's like, well, do you get the concept? They're like, yeah, that makes sense, because how long do you want to have the practice not really provide what you need to provide for the household? I mean, do you want to have multiple income sources? Do you want to be debt free? Do you want to, have, assets and protection and all these things? Then you got to get used to the business providing for the household as the parent company to do that.
Yeah, it is. It takes a while for that concept to sink in. It's like anything, you got to practice it more,
Yeah.
right? For it to, and that's the thing for the audience too, is like depending where you are in your financial journey, right? It's a learning experience. We're always learning about business and finance, and it's not something that we went to school for. We went to school for, medical training. So you kind of learn by the school of hard knocks as you start up your business, and you're trying to learn business as you go along. And part of business, which we often forget, is the financial management side of it. We get good at like looking at our billing, right? We need to get the money in, but
Right.
then the management of the money once it's in, that's where I've seen myself and others, fall into kind of the same trap
Yeah.
where you put the business before everything else. And then once you get your mindset in that business is actually working for you and your household, it takes on a different meaning, right?
Yeah.
And it's not that you're taking your away from like your care or what you're putting, into helping people, right? That's always paramount. That's the purpose of the business. But then the main thing from the business is that it should take care of you. It should be bringing that revenue into the household. And it's when that priority is not there, that's when people have hard times.
Yes. Yeah. And it has to be in excess of just what you would pay yourself as a physical therapist. You know,
Right.
it has to pay you as an owner and an executive. And there's a different
And why is
compensation
that?
for
Why
that.
is that?
Well, I mean, someone has to do it, and you took the risk of putting the business there. I mean, it like I said, it's risky. I
Yeah.
mean, when Medicare can come in there and audit you and say you owe us $250,000. Who's going to pay for that?
Right.
Right? I mean, you're on the hook for that. Someone gets sued. You get sued by a rogue employee or something like that. Who's going to pay for that? Okay,
Hmm.
you may have insurance and all that, but who's paying for the insurance? So, I
Yeah.
mean, there's all these risks that you carry in practice ownership. I mean, you lose one PT, that probably has a net impact of about a loss of like 300 to 350,000 in value to your business just by
Hmm.
losing a PT that's like seeing a full load of patients. There's a risk, right? So you got to make sure that there's compensation for that risk. And if you can embed that early on to how you manage your cash flow of the business, if you can kind of factor all that in really, really early on, then it gets you ahead of the game. But even if you're 5 years in, 10 years in, 20 years in, it's never too late to change that. But it is a different method of how you allocate money, which includes, how you pay yourself at the household level. And a lot of people, it's hard to get used to, but once you get it in, it makes you feel really good,
Yeah.
you know?
And I think too, it's one of those things that if you are putting the household first, right? And there's that, like you said, you've told us many times, like it's the demand for income.
Yes.
So, like we all know those times in life where there's been an intense external pressure to get something done, and you get it done,
Tell
right?
me about it.
Um, you got to change your ways. You got to do something. You got to hustle, like whatever it takes, right?
Yep.
And so if you have that within your household that needs that certain amount of income, no matter what, because you're putting it into certain assets and things,
Yeah.
then you got to hustle harder or change your operating basis or whatever you need to do in the business to make sure that money's coming in, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great story I had on that. I mean, I talked with a physical therapist one day, and he was complaining about lack of profits and lack of money, and I was like, all right, let's do a thought experiment here. Like, how much money do you need in your household to not just cover your basic expenses, but to be able to invest like you want to invest, to be able to have discretionary income, and then obviously to live the lifestyle that you want to live. Like, how much is that? And he's like, no one's ever asked me that question before where I include all three of those categories. And I'm like, well, we're going to figure it out. And he came up with like $500,000, that he needed. And, he was probably bringing half of that home, like 250. He's like, I go, you can see why you're a little deficient right now, right? I mean, you need 500, like you actually do need 500 if you want to live this life, but you're only bringing in 250. It's like, oh my gosh. And after we got through all the the crying and the complaining and all the excuses, I was like, well, what does your practice need to do at a 20% profit margin for you to be able to bring home $500,000, right? And when he worked out the numbers, he was like, you could see like this, like his eyes lit up like that. He's like, oh, that's not that much. Like I can do that.
Mhm.
I may need to see a few more patients, here, and I need to, fix this, but I can get to that number. Right. So that kind of planning always starts at the household level, but nobody ever does that. They're always so worried about the business. It's like, what does the household need? And then what does the business then need to produce in order for you to sustain that? That's the sequence.
Mhm.
And it works if you let it happen. It's not going to happen overnight, but it shouldn't take 3 years.
Right.
You should be able to do that within 1 to 2 years.
Yeah. So as we're making more of that money, then sometimes we have a concern around taxes, right?
Oh boy.
And so let's talk a little bit about, your advice on taxes. So what's some of the ideas or strategies, like broadly, that someone would be, thinking about when it comes to how can I pay less for taxes?
Yeah, I think this is where your personal financial plan is kind of important because I mean, let's for example, I'll have some people that'll have a strategy of, okay, I have a big tax bill. Let's say that I buy a building, or real estate of some kind. Well, I can use the depreciation of the building through something called a cost segregation that would help offset the profit, the tax I'm going to owe on the profit of my business. Okay. And that's just one example, right? Of really strategically looking at the big picture and saying, how do I not only want to grow my wealth and expand my income sources, but how can I use that as a tax advantage for my business, which creates a really big tax liability for me.
Mhm.
Okay. That'd be one example of something that somebody could do. And there's a huge spectrum of things that you can do in between there. Not all tax deductions are going to give you a $50,000 or $100,000 tax break. Some of them may be 5 or 1,000 or 10,000 or whatever it is. The point is that you're working with someone, and I'm not a CPA, but obviously we have, groups that we refer and work with, that understands like what it is that you're trying to accomplish.
Mhm.
And I know that you want to minimize your taxes, but what else are you trying to do so that
Yeah.
we can really figure out what the best strategy going forward here? Most people just don't have that experience. They have an accountant or bookkeeper that prepares their taxes, documents them really well, and files them, and that's their
Mhm.
tax strategy.
Would you
And
say that most people see their taxes, they complain about their taxes and, prep them, submit them, and then it's sort of forgotten in terms of what should we be doing to protect our revenue and our assets from
it,
too much tax?
it's forgotten until April 14th of the next year when you
Right.
got the big tax bill, and then
Oh,
they
shoot, I
think
gotta do
they
something.
then they think about it. Then they think about it after they write the check, and then they think about it, and then same thing happens the next year.
Yeah.
So this is really why you need someone paying attention to your effective tax rate. And, part of that would be, we're just working with, advisors that will look at that and say, hey, look, your tax rate's 35%. You could do something about that, so let's come up with a strategy so we can
Mhm.
minimize that.
Yeah. At least there's, oh man, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of pages in the tax code, right?
Ugh.
But there's lots of ways to offset the taxes, right? If you know what you're doing, right? And if you work
Yeah.
with the right experts to help you through that process. But again, it's one of those things that takes some time, some attention towards it. It pays off in the long run, right?
Kind of like marketing, my friend. It's not a
That's right.
it's not a do it yourself thing, isn't it? I mean,
No.
you've had, you know, I don't know how many years of experience in marketing, and especially for PTs. Not only were you a PT, but you've now understand the marketing side of it. Like, why wouldn't I go to you for marketing advice? Of course I would. Right. So it's the same thing from on the financial end. Why would you try to do it yourself if you had no training or expertise in this area? Sure, you can learn on your own, but don't you guys have like 1,001 other things that you need to do? I mean, you
Yeah.
do have to let go of some things and trust other people. It's okay. Not
Yeah.
everyone is trying to gouge you for money,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, and I think that's one thing I've learned a lot in my journey in business, right? From being a practice owner and growing that, and then with practice promotions, growing that where we have like over 90 staff. There's uh, the larger you get, the actually more consultants and advisors you bring in, right? Because you
Yeah.
can't be an expert at everything, and that's actually the secret to growth. I think is leaning on experts and having their help you get to that next level, right? Because you can't be the expert at everything.
No, I mean, you know, the vision and the purpose, and that's your
Mhm.
job as an owner, is to make sure everyone's really aware of that and believes in it. And then you have good executives and vendors that can help you implement that and do their job.
Mhm. So let's talk here a little bit about an important part of financial advice, and that is actually thinking with the end in mind, right?
Mm,
So you help a lot of clinics with their exit strategy, right?
yeah.
Both how that looks from a personal and business. And so, for you, like as you look at practice owners and work with them, like what brings about the greatest return on your most valuable asset, which is your business?
Well, there's definitely a lot of things that probably go into that. Let's see. I think it really does start with the method of how you want to exit. I mean, look, I'm really high on the physical therapy space. I just think that the values of these businesses are going to continue to go up. So I think it's a really good business. It's still and I know there's a lot of struggles right now, and there's a lot of people that aren't doing well, but it's still a really good industry. I forgot the last numbers I saw. I'm sure it was like 50 or 60 billion dollars of
Mhm.
assets spent in the physical therapy industry. Maybe it
Yeah, and
was
it's growing. It's
it's
going to grow
grown.
like, I don't know, 10, 20, 30% in the next decade, right? So,
Yeah. So if you want to have something that you can transfer, that's going to have some worth to it, you're going to have to kind of get in the heads of the people that would be buying it. Doesn't have to be corporate people. It can be, anybody else, but what are they going to look for? Well, I think the first thing someone's going to look for is this thing growing or is it dying? And who wants to who no one's going to overpay you for something that is not growing. So you need to make sure that your practice is growing, which means new patients, right?
mhm.
Which means that you have full patient loads and you're seeing that in the business. So I think that's probably first and foremost is the growth of the business. Someone's going to want to see that this business is really jamming and has a good marketing system in there that is driving in a lot of new patients into this organization. Some other things obviously are they're going to want to see, good leadership. They want to see low turnover with staff. I think that no one wants to buy something that where there's toxic culture there at all. And then certainly profitability. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's almost like your credit score, right? Like what's the biggest part of your credit score is like your utilization ratio, right? I think from buying a practice, the profit margins, your EBITDA, your net earnings, whatever term you want to use for it, is going to be a huge factor in what your practice values for.
Mhm.
So this is why it's so important that you, as you're managing your finances of your business, you make sure that you're putting uh, these little accounts, right? Which are going to act like, some of it may go for taxes, some of it may go for your household, some of it may go for the business savings, but they're all there to kind of capture the profit of the business to make sure that we're staying in that 15 to 20% range.
Mhm.
And if you can do that and you got a $2 million practice, $3 million practice, at a 20% profit margin at a 7 multiple, that's not nothing.
That's nice.
you know so a part of what we do is just making sure that you're trying to increase the value of the business. And then what happens, are you ready to sell? Meaning, if you sell, are you going to have enough in income, assets, and resources to be able to live the life that you want to live? Because you don't get to take it back.
Mm-hmm.
You only get one shot at selling. So you better make sure that you are completely prepared, that you have enough. I think we've talked about that. And, I think when I gave you your number of how much you needed, you're like, damn, that's a lot. I'm like, yeah, but think about it. Would you have any worry about money? No, I really wouldn't. All right, good. So that's the right number. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's when you have the right numbers. Like when you don't have any consideration that you'd have a money problem. That's the right
Mm-hmm.
number, right? So that would be, how much have I invested outside of my practice and my real estate or my other personal investments? And then how much do I get for my practice? You combine those two numbers together, and then hopefully that's enough. And, we plan that out for people so that they feel confident about that.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is you really need someone to guide you through that. Haven't been through that myself. We often underestimate the amount
Yes.
of revenue and financial assets and things that it's going to take to enjoy, the rest of your life there, and feel stable and secure, and also provide for the things that you want to provide for, whether it's, the lifestyle, the charity work, whatever it takes there, right?
Especially if you live to like 100 years old, man. I mean, come on, like you sell it at like 60 and you got 40 more years. That money's got to last you a long time.
Yeah,
That's a lot of plane rides, Neil.
it is.
Yeah.
And so, as we're talking about, different financial stuff here. So what would you say are some simple things a practice owner can do, this week or month to start taking control of their business's financial stability?
Yeah, I would definitely say start off with the numbers. In fact, really figure out your facility capacity. And then another thing I would look at is like your business make break number. Like look at really what that is. And then I want you to add about 15% to that number. Okay? Because chances are that you're not factoring in your profits when you calculate your make break number. So I want you to do that and see, okay, great. And then after you get over like, oh my God, so instead of having to bring in 100,000 this month, you have to bring in 120,000 this month. Okay. So then how many additional patient visits would you really have to see on a daily basis to be able to get to that number, knowing what your reimbursement rate is? All right. Number one, I don't think it's going to be as bad as what you think. Number two, hopefully it entices you to call myself and Neil so that you can get the marketing right, so that you can bring in those additional patients, and then we'll show you how to manage the money and take it to the household as well. That's a good way to do it.
Yeah, I like that. That's good. All right. So any other parting words of advice here before we wrap up here today?
No, I'm like I said, I think I'm super bullish on physical therapy. I know that a lot of people are worried about like inflation and a lot of these things, and I think that's probably going to continue to happen. And we'll probably have some ups and downs of there. We'll probably have a year we had like high inflation last year. Maybe in like the next year or two that'll come down a little bit, and then it might spike back up. I think it's just going to be part and parcel to our lives. It has been for the last 100 and something years anyway. So I don't know why anybody's like all of a sudden like, oh wow, we have inflation. Like, yeah, it's been going on a long time.
Yeah.
People are worried about the banks. I think it would probably behoove you to look at a different strategy as opposed to just keeping hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in just a bank account. That would probably be a smart idea as well. But just be willing to like listen to ideas and things that are maybe not mainstream so much. But most importantly, just be a little bit more proactive about your finances and make sure you confront and look at it, because it's not scary. It's not going to kill you. And you may be surprised what happens.
It's what you earn, right? It's what you need to enjoy the life that you want to enjoy, right? And so I think that's just a great thing about Eric and his group at Econologics Financial Advisors is they really care about their clients. They have a ton of experience in helping healthcare practices look at things a little bit differently. And I learned a ton working with Eric over the decades that I've known him. So I encourage you to take a look at Econologics Financial Advisors. Go to econologicsfinancialadvisors.com. They got tons of free resources. One that's super popular right now is the Cash Flow Crunch for practice owners. It's a great download. It's a great read. It'll definitely give you some areas that you need to look at in your practice and give you some metrics and measurements that you should be meeting with that. So definitely go to econologicsfinancialadvisors.com and check out that free resource for Cash Flow Crunch for practice owners. So thanks, Eric, for being on the call today and sharing your wisdom. It's always a pleasure.
My pleasure.
All right. And we'll catch you next time. So thanks, everybody. Wishing you much success.
Thanks again for joining us today. Be sure to check out practicepromotions.net/power. There, listeners can download over 9 checklists and free resources made to coach you through simple, proven marketing actions to increase new patients. So check it out today. That's practicepromotions.net/power, and I'll see you next time.